Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Amie and I'm so grateful that you're here. In this video, we're going to be looking at bookish propaganda that I will not be falling for, which is a trend that has been going on social media for a while. If you're online, you've probably heard of this trend over and over and over again. And I just thought it would be quite nice to do like a bookish spin on it. So if that's your jam, please stay tuned. I just want to preface this video by saying everything I'm saying here is an opinion. And it's like a code of conduct by which I live my life. I in no way think that everybody needs to abide to the same rules that I do or have the same exact way of going about life that I do. Because this is the internet, and I know that sometimes people do take other people's opinions as a personal attack. And you know what? I don't pay your bills. You probably don't know me. My opinions of things should really not affect you that much, I think. Because why are you allowing some random girl on the internet to ruin your whole day just because she has a different opinion than you? If you have an alternate opinion, I'd love to hear it. There's enough vileness on the internet. We don't need this corner of the internet to be like that as well, okay? So yeah, let's get into it. You do not need to own every single book you read. And I know this is probably going to ruffle a few feathers. I know that there are people who genuinely get joy out of collecting books and are in a financial position to do so. But I feel like sometimes there's this subliminal pressure to own as many books as possible, either because it looks beautiful, which I've seen people's libraries and they do look beautiful, or because sometimes we feel as though we're not proper readers unless we have a physical manifestation of reading. And I have to say, I was guilty of these thoughts as well. And it's the reason why I didn't start my YouTube channel for a long time, because I felt like I didn't have enough books. And so if I didn't have enough books, I couldn't then have a worthy enough background. And if I didn't have a worthy enough background, then I can't talk about books, which is insane. The only thing that you need in order to talk about books is just reading books. That is literally the only thing. Everything else is extra. And it's taken me a while to take my brain out of that sort of mindset and just embrace where I am in life. And also, I think for people like me who don't like clutter, maybe it's probably heavy influence from the way that I grew up. My mom quite frequently would go around the house either like gifting or donating or throwing out just things that we didn't need. And I think there's a part of me that very much resonated with that kind of behavior. So even till this day, like I don't own anything that I don't use or is not seriously sentimental. Because if I have like a house full of things I don't use, I start to feel uneasy, like almost a discomfort from having things that I don't use. And so I think it also translates into books. Like I think about the amount of books I read every year and the sheer amount of books that I've read that I will literally never pick back up again, either because I didn't like it or because it didn't interest me. And I was thinking to myself, if I owned all these books, what would be the point exactly? Because I know I'm never going to read it again. And so my policy has very much changed in the sense that now I very much make use of my local library, or for the last few months, I've had a Kindle Unlimited subscription. So I've been making my way around reading the books that are on there. And I've always kept in mind the books that I would like to physically buy because I've either gone back to reread them or because I love them so much and I would love to have a physical copy. So that's more so my thought process behind things. I'm no longer just going to flat out purchase a physical copy of a book anymore. I'm just going to consciously buy the things that I've loved. It's definitely a dream of mine to build a personal library, but I think it would be even more gratifying if that library only contained books that I absolutely fell in love with. And that's it. Next up is shaming audiobook readers. I have had it with people trying to make it seem like people who use audiobooks are not real readers. Audiobook reading is inclusive. It means that people, for a myriad of reasons, maybe it's the fact that they're blind or partially sighted, or they have some sort of disability or life-limiting conditions, are able to read books and experience literature in the same way that the rest of us are. And for other people to kind of look down their nose about how other people are reading very much irritates me. And I hate the thought process behind, oh, they're listening to it, so it's not reading. No, it's reading, but just maybe not the traditional way that we've grown up being accustomed to reading. Another thing is, from personal experience, I found that reading via audiobook is actually extremely difficult. And I say this as somebody who considers myself to be like quite a voracious reader. I tried to read a book via an audiobook like a few months back with my Spotify subscription. And when I tell you that I could not do it, I'm not joking. It takes so much effort to actually sit down, block out the noise, block out every distraction, and just solely concentrate on listening to the book that you're reading. I think that the people who are able to listen to a book and analyze it in the same way that the rest of us are when we're actually looking at the words are bloody incredible. Because till this day, I have not successfully been able to read an audiobook without the words accompanying it. I think it's very easy to dismiss the effort that it takes to do that when you haven't done it yourself or when you haven't attempted to do it yourself. I've never had a problem with people who read audiobooks, nor have I thought that they were doing less work than I was simply because they weren't holding a book in their hands. But ever since my audiobook experience, I have even more respect for just how much effort that I think that it takes to be able to produce the results that they do when they read. And honestly, I'm just happy when people are able to read. I very much believe in just everybody being afforded the same opportunities in life, and audiobooks make that possible. And how could you possibly hate that unless of course you have a problem with people having access to the same things you do? Because I think that's where it stems from. It's just like a dismissal or a way to put down people who are different from you or people who you think don't deserve certain things because of who they are or how they look or their experiences, which I think is just bullshit. So yeah, for me, definitely propaganda I'm not falling for is people thinking that audiobook reading is not real reading, because I find that to be extremely disingenuous. Propaganda I'm not falling for, number 3, separating the art from the artist. I simply do not have the cognitive dissonance that it takes to separate the art from the artist, and I acknowledge that. I do not understand how you can see somebody who has done categorically horrendous things, or has said horrendous things, or has done things in a way that they have influenced other people negatively, and give your money to them. And I've been seeing lots of discussion, especially in terms of like musicians, about how sometimes you grew up listening to their music. And so it's difficult to separate the feelings that you had, whether it's like happy childhood memories or just childhood sort of like experiences from the artist. And to some degree, I understand that. I've not been in a position where somebody that I grew up admiring as a child has ended up being a horrible person. So in many ways, I can almost, I guess, sympathize with that line of thinking. I think where my problem is when you actively publicize the fact that you cannot separate the art from the artist, where you're going out of your way to show everybody that you are supporting this artist, knowing fully well the things that they've said or the things that they've done. And I also think that it's another thing, not only to actively support them, not only to publicize that you're actively supporting them, but also to defend them. I think that is the last straw where I think, if given the opportunity, you would do exactly what this person is thinking, or your opinions very much align with theirs, which is why you're going out of your way to support them. Or you're just a horrendous person. Because I don't understand how you can live in the world that we do and see the vast amount of people suffering every day. There's just something fundamentally wrong with supporting a terrible person, I think. And I just cannot do it. For whatever reason, my soul can't handle it. I just cannot fathom supporting somebody who has done or said something extremely horrendous and then not shown any capacity for remorse or growth or change. My brain doesn't work that way. I have free will, and I very much exercise my free will into not supporting people who have fundamentally different morals than I do. Because some people try to frame it as, okay, I don't care what the person does in their personal life. I'm here for the music, or I'm here for the dancing, or I'm here for the reading. The way that a person feels about the world bleeds into the work that they do. Like, it's not whatever it is that people have that makes them separate the art from the artist, makes them disconnect what people have done with the work that they produced. I don't have it, especially in this world that we live in, where it seems like so many horrible people get away with so much shit. Not for me. And I do side eye people who do this, because I'm like, I don't think I could trust you in real life to be morally upstanding. And I think it definitely affects the way that I see other people, because I feel like as a society, if we are not standing for anything, if we are not able to put our pleasures aside for the good of the world or the good of other people, then what are we doing? I have to say, from an empathetic standpoint, think about it. Put yourselves in the shoes of a victim of various things, whether it's racism or homophobia or religious intolerance or discrimination or prejudice. If you were a victim in any sort of horrendous circumstance, would you not like people to come out and take a stand for you? Because I always think if I was in a position where I was being taken advantage of or hurt, or if somebody I loved was in that position, we could get so far if other people joined us in the fight to get justice. And so that's how I feel when I choose not to support certain people. I don't have a lot of power in the world, I don't have a lot of influence. The only thing that I can do in my little corner of the world is just not give money to a horrendous person. And I just don't think that's too much to ask for. Maybe I'm being crazy, maybe I'm not being reasonable. I just don't understand how you can see evil being thrown around and still decide, you know what, I'm going to support you because you're talented. There are lots of talented, good people, and those are the people that I will support. I don't want to support talented, bad people. And that's just where I stand with that. Bookish propaganda I won't be falling for, not holding female and male characters to the same standards, especially in romance and fantasy books. Now, look, I live in the world. I know that for a vast majority of people, female and male people in general are not held to the same standards in terms of so many aspects of life. When it comes to books and the way that we judge characters, I find that this also bleeds into how we analyze things. And what I'm talking about is like how sometimes we'll have a much stronger negative response to the actions of a female character. But if a male character did it, we wouldn't have quite the same problems, or we would try our very best to either excuse the behavior or rationalize why they're doing certain things, almost the way that it manifests in real life. And I feel like if we're going to go the route of analyzing characters, which I do, I'm not, exempting myself from doing this. I do, because sometimes I find myself, as much as you try not to feed into misogyny, I find myself subliminally playing into those tropes, and I have to actively stop myself and ask myself why I feel certain way about certain things. So I think that if there is a certain behavior that I would not tolerate from a female character, there is no way that I should be tolerating it from a male character. I just like to have that kind of behavioral, moral standpoint for each character and not base it on gender. So if we're trying to be like critical or we're trying to have a nuanced take, make sure that whatever it is that you're judging about them or you're highlighting is something that is happening across the board. Because it irritates me when, especially like movies and TV shows and books, where they're like, this certain female character is unlikable, so therefore she's a horrendous character. But then you have a male character doing the same things or even worse, but they're kind of praised for it, or it's kind of seen as something that's attractive or in high demand. Sometimes you see things and you have hope that things are changing in terms of gender disparity, but then you read certain things, and when it's coming from a woman specifically, it's even more heartbreaking, because you know that she was either actively taught these things or this is how she's grown up. So it gives you insight into the way that she feels about herself, to harbor so much almost like resentment for that female character based on something, but to almost praise it in the male character. And it makes me sad, because we have so much to do and we have so far still to go. And I acknowledge that, whilst also being completely heartbroken that at times it feels like we just haven't made enough progress, or as much progress as we should have, in terms of addressing gender disparity, in terms of how we view characters and behaviors that we're willing to put up with, and how we treat women that are not likable, women that are maybe not your cookie cutter kind of women, characters that are trying to figure it out as well. I feel like sometimes we have much less patience than we have for male characters. When I read reviews or hot takes about certain books, and I'm like, yeah, but if this was a male character, you wouldn't feel this way. And I know you wouldn't, because there have been other characters that have done the same thing. You haven't had the same problems. So that's propaganda I'm not falling for. If we're going to hold someone to a certain standard, let's just be doing that across the board. Propaganda I'm not falling for, trying to paint romance as frivolous and having no value. That is simply bullshit. As somebody who didn't grow up seeing romantic relationships that I would consider ideal, I think romance books play a huge role into me examining the kind of things that I am willing to put up with, the kind of things that I celebrate, the kind of things that I elevate in terms of quality that I would like. Romance books have taught me so much about human behavior. They've taught me so much about human experience in the way that, quite frankly, nothing else has, nothing else in life that I've done. And I think it's especially good for people who don't grow up in houses where they talk about love and romantic love. Romance books for me have been probably the most heavily contributing factor into me being able to identify toxic behavior that is quite separate from my real life. And I think romance books have also, in terms of when I've been feeling down or because I went through a depressive episode a few years ago, and literally in that time, the only things I could do were go to work, shower, read, and do Duolingo. That is literally all I could do. I couldn't do anything else. I wasn't responding to texts. It was so hard for me to get on the phone. I wasn't going out. And for me, not to be dramatic, but romance books may have saved my life. I'm not joking. And so I think that for people to sit there and pretend like romance books are quite frivolous, and I know that there is a background meaning because women enjoy it. So if women enjoy it, they must not be that valuable to the human experience. And to that, I say, few, because that is not true. Romance books do more, especially romance books that go further than showing you a man and a woman in love, showing you different characters from different walks of life, the things that affect their relationship, whether it's in terms of finances, mental health problems, family backgrounds, family dynamics. You cannot tell me that you've read a vast amount of romance books and you think that they hold no value. Am I saying that all romance books are the best things since sliced bread and you cannot critique a single thing about them? No, that is not what I'm saying. And also, believe it or not, romance books at times I use as self-help books, especially books with heavy topics about, people who have been through a lot and are now trying to come to a place where, they're finally relaxing or they're finally healing. For me, romance books then kind of function as self-help books in a way. And so I, quite frankly, will never fall for people who think they're useless or they're frivolous or they hold no importance. They 100% do. And I think, especially as women, they inform the kind of behavior that we like, the kind of behaviors that we're willing to put up with. They provide an opportunity for us to explore ourselves in a way that not many things do, in a world that doesn't exactly encourage us to do it. I never say never, but I'm 99.9% sure that there will never be a day where I come out and I say romance books are useless. Absolutely not. They are as worthy as every other book out there. I think the more I read, the more I realize that genre is not the thing, it's the contents of the book that matter, not the genre, not the characters. It's not an isolated thing. There are a bunch of things that come together to make something valuable. And just because it happens to be a genre that you don't like doesn't now declare the entire thing not worthy or useless or frivolous. Not falling for that. That is complete bullshit. This might get me in trouble, but I think that authors should be able to write characters of different races. Now, I've read so many different opinions about this, and I can see where they all come from. And I can see when you add people's backgrounds and different contexts, you can understand how people have arrived at the conclusions that they've made. However, for me, I think that authors should be able to write characters of different races. And I think what makes an author great at it versus an author that's not so great is research and willingness to learn and willingness to talk to people that look different from you, that sound different from you, that walk through life differently than you do. There was a specific author, I don't think I'll go into mentioning who she is, but she was asked on Goodreads if she would consider writing a romance book with a person of color as a main character. And she said, she'd want to leave it to an author of color to do. But I kind of think that's a cop out. And I think that it's important for us all, if we're going to make any progress as a society, we must be able to acknowledge the differences between all of us, but also respect the differences. And I don't have any problem with an author writing about a main character that looks different from them, that sounds different from them, that has a different lived experience than them. I think you need to do your due diligence. You need to do your research. You need to talk to people of that race, of that religion, of that background. And in the process, include them and say, okay, is this appropriate? Is this not appropriate? Does this character feel like a wealth of stereotypes, or do they feel like a real person? And I think that's where things get complicated. I get it if your story is based in a place that isn't actually racially diverse. So let's say that you're writing in a place that has majority, white people, for instance, and there is no way that your character, based on their experiences, based on the people that they surround themselves by, would have run into a character of color. But when you're writing in a huge city where there is a melting pot of people and you have excluded people of color from the entire narrative, or you think you don't have a right to write people of color for fear of backlash, I just think it's a bit of a cop out. I think you can definitely do it in a way that is respectful and a way that is well researched. I feel like it can be done. You know, I'm not one of those people that think only Black people can write Black people, or only white people can write white people, or only Asian people can write Asian people. I don't really think that. And I'm sure people will have their own opinions or differing opinions and different stances. But I think if I was an author and I was going to write a character that was a different race than me, I would just take the time to talk to somebody in real life that is very similar to this character and do my research just to make sure that I am not making this person a caricature. And it's a character that somebody who is of that same race would be able to recognize as somebody of that race. I don't know if that makes any sense, but I'm not of the opinion that only authors of a certain, I just don't think that. Not in 2025 with the wealth of resources that we have around us. Whenever I hear anybody say, oh, I think I'll leave, I understand where the fear comes from, but I also think if it's a priority to you, you'll make it happen. So that's just my opinion on that. Another propaganda I'm not falling for, overly tropified books. If you're a reader, you know what I'm talking about. Especially, this is especially prevalent in new books that are coming out, where you read a book and you read about a certain character, and it's quite obvious that the author is either trying to include as many tropes, as many popular tropes as they can into the story, or they market the story as a trope rather than marketing it as a story that happens to include these tropes. And usually the effects that this has on the story is that it ends up not feeling genuine. It feels like you're building a story based on a trope as opposed to just letting things unfold and then reading it and being able to identify the tropes that happen to be in there. So the tropes are like the leading thing, they're the main part of the story. But the character's genuine story, it doesn't feel real. It's like if you've decided, I'm going to have only one bed, forced proximity, it just feels like you're trying to include as much as possible so that you're able to sell the book to a vast amount of people without actually paying attention to the stories and the characters and the development. And I've read quite a few books like this, and it just becomes an extremely manufactured story. It doesn't seem genuine. You know how you have like certain videos and it feels like the video is a walking ad? So instead of the video being accompanied by ads, it's like an ad being accompanied by a video. That's how it feels with overly tropified books. And I hate it. And I get that authors have money to make, but I think that sometimes I can sniff when an author is trying to pander to certain tropes as opposed to just letting it happen in a more organic way. And that is just propaganda that I will not be falling for. Because most of the time, if not all the time, it does not translate to a good story. And I stand by that. Another propaganda I'm not falling for, dragging a story out to death. You know what I mean? A new series comes out, they say it's only going to be a duology or a trilogy. And all of a sudden, we're sitting there and we're 6 books in. What do you mean? You said it was going to be a duology. And you know when it's so obvious that the person is only after money, that they're dragging out this story and as a result, ruining what could possibly have been a really good story by trying to expand it and therefore extract more money out of people. That's what I'm talking about. There are videos every now and again about capitalism and people making money. Well, I think sometimes making money disrupts the art. And as fans, I think that sometimes we cause it. I'm not saying all the time, but I think sometimes we find it hard to let characters and good stories go and to let them like rest. And there does come a point you want to end a series, whether that is a TV show or a book, on a note where people want more. I feel like it's better to end it where people are like, I wish we had more, as opposed to I wish we stopped a couple of books back or a couple of seasons back, or I wish we could have less. I feel like I wish we could have more is always better than I wish we could have less, and that translates to books. You are dragging these characters out. You're either putting like new epilogues or bonus exclusive content. You just know it's a money grab. They're not really telling you a new story, and it just feels disingenuous and fake and ruins what could have been a really great thing. So I ask, if your plan is to have a duology, please make it a duology, okay? At best, one more book. But when you start extracting 6 books out of what was originally supposed to be 2, or extracting 3 books out of what was supposed to be a standalone, Houston, we have a problem, okay? Another one, not reading a book because you cannot relate to the characters. By the way, I'm holding this pair of scissors because ever since I stopped holding my mic, I realized that I don't know what to do with my hands, so I apologize. Maybe I should pick up this pen instead. Yeah, I just need to be able to do something with my hands. Anyways, So, not being able to relate to characters that you're reading about, so therefore you will not read the book. I think that that is bullshit, and I think that is a cop out, and I think that is lazy. You don't have to be able to relate to everybody you read about. Not everybody has the chance to travel as much as they would like to, or meet people from all different walks of life, or just experience people that are vastly different from them. However, books present you an opportunity to do so. And I think that for you to say that you will not read a book simply because the main character or the main characters are not like you or don't have things in common with you is just extremely close minded and low key discriminatory, low key prejudice. Like, why does somebody being from the exact same background as you have to be a prerequisite to the fact that you will give this book a shot? Now, I'm not saying that you should love this book, I'm not saying that you should go around screaming that this is the best book ever written. But the fact that you are reading books in that genre, you will not give this book a chance simply because the main characters or the characters do not look like you, do not sound like you, do not live life the way that you live life. I don't get that. And also, don't be so short-sighted, because you can see somebody and think that you have nothing in common with them and be so shocked to your core that it will change your outlook on life. There are so many books that I've gone in thinking, I have nothing in common with this person. I've come out thinking, I am more similar to this person than I ever would have thought. And I'm so glad that I read this book because it has made me realize that. And so I think, don't be so short-sighted. Don't limit yourself in a world that will probably limit you at some point. Give yourself every opportunity to form your own opinions based on what you experience, not based on the people that have raised you or the people who have guided you. Give yourself an opportunity to have a different opinion, to have a different thought, to experience someone else, to experience something else other than what you would have experienced naturally. And it's a thought process that I don't understand as somebody who is extremely curious and is always wanting to figure out what makes certain people tick and what informs certain behavior. I think for me, it's just wild that you could see a book and just give it absolutely no chance based on the fact that the main characters or all the characters are not like you. I think it's extremely limiting. I want to get all out of life that I can, and books allow me to. So, yeah. Thank you guys for watching my video. As somebody who is fairly new to this space and introducing myself to more like opinion-based content, this is all I could come up with for now. If I ever have a part 2, I'd be happy to do it. But let me know, what are the bookish propagandas you're not falling for? I would love to know your thoughts. If you have any opinions, please share. And as usual, I would really appreciate feedback for this video. What did you enjoy? What do you feel like could be improved? Just let me know. And yeah, I'll see you when I see you next time.